everyone, and welcome to the Institute of Cultural Diplomacy's first public discussion. Woo! Basically, this is a new idea which gives everyone the opportunity to project their views on up-to-date topics. And today's topic is the role of technology in society. So basically, in the wake of the death of Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, it is important for us to recognize that technology is a huge part of our lives, even in ways which we don't recognize or we simply take for granted. Technology in the last few decades has generated from the first computer to now smartphones and tablets that combine everything we want in our pockets wherever we are. However, is this always good, or are there some negatives? Basically, I'm going to start with some quotes, and then I'm going to pass the topics on to Giuseppe, Sarah, and Amy. And they're going to start with questions, do a brief introduction, and then it's open for debate. Each thing is going to be 10 minutes, so if you do have something to say, please keep it to 2 minutes max, so everyone gets their chance to say whatever they want. Right, so here are the quotes to get you all thinking. President Obama: there may be no greater tribute to Steve's success than the fact that much of the world learned of his passing on a device that he invented. Albert Einstein: it has become appallingly obvious that our technology has exceeded our humanity. Freeman Dyson: technology is a gift of God. After the gift of life, it is perhaps the greatest of God's gifts. It is the mother of civilizations, of arts, and of sciences. John F. Kennedy: the world is very different now, for man holds in his mortal hands the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life. Karl Marx: the production of too many useful things results in too many useless people. Giuseppe.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so first of all, I wanted to thank all of you to be here today. As you know, it's our first panel discussion, so we didn't have so much time to organize it, so sorry for this. The next time we will have more time, and you will know much more in advance about the themes, so you can also research and prepare yourself more about this. So our role here now is to introduce some themes, asking you some questions, then you can answer, and we can, establish a discussion, and we can all discuss about these things. So the first one that I would like to introduce is, as the main theme of our panel discussion, as you know, is the role of technology in society. What I would like to introduce is how global communication and information in today helps, or maybe sometimes doesn't help, in breaking the stereotypes about other cultures, and encourage or does not encourage multicultural dialogue. We all, we belong to the new generation of native digital natives, or almost digital natives. So as this plus of this plethora of information that we get every day from all sides of the world is really helping us, in your opinion, to know more about the other people of the world, the other parts of the world, the other communities and cultures of the world? Because, as you know, the information is always, there is always a filter, which is the observer, the journalist, or the blogger, or whoever, who is always filtering what we are getting. So the observer cannot be objective, so the information we get cannot be objective neither. And this is the first issue. The second issue is that sometimes information is controlled, as in the past, of course, where there was no the internet, it was easier to control information from the powers, I don't know, the political powers or the economical powers. Today, internet claimed to bring a revolution in this, but is really internet able to do that, or still the information is somehow controlled, and the information we get, even if we can have many platforms through internet, is really more objective than before, in your opinion? Then this is the first big question that I would like to discuss about. The second is, as we are all almost native digital, but not everyone is in the society. So now we are going to create in the society kind of big difference between us and the people without access to internet and to the new forms of communication and information. So is this creating a problem for the, I mean, like difficult to communicate between these two parts of the society? And if that is this really, I mean, it is better now, or it was better before, where everybody could have access to the same, more or less, sort of information? The last question that I would like, I mean, the last discussion that I would like to stimulate is about another panel discussion that took place last year in the US, and the title was "In the Age of Global Civilization, There is no us and them." Well, in my opinion, in this world, there will always be, unfortunately, us and them. So, also because the information, I mean, internet and the information now is making the passage of the communication passage faster than before, but somehow probably not closer than before. I mean, the people are not closer. They can just communicate faster, but not closer. And we can see, for example, in internet, the multicultural dialogue can be stimulated from one side, but from the other side, maybe sometimes the radicalism are growing more through these platforms. So I would like to ask you, what do you think about this? So we can, if somebody is interested in giving an opinion. Phil?
Thank you. Well, you talked about that censorship and, of course, censorship and the filter of the blogger, the journalist is still a very strong hurdle even in the internet. But what's great about the internet is everything is accessible. Well, not everything. There is still state censorship. I did try to, but you don't have to go anywhere. You can just sit at your computer and dig. You can dig deeper and deeper. Of course, not everyone is prone to do stuff like that. Not everybody is a natural researcher. It still depends a lot on personal skills. And, well, the internet makes it easier to communicate with other people, but you have to get in touch with them first. So I usually get in touch with people in the real world and keep in contact, stay in contact with them over the internet. And I lost my point, sorry.
Well, I think it's definitely easier through the internet, for instance, to get access, or to have contact, like you said, to people who are the other side of the world. But at the same time, you have also there's a book, The Network Society by Manuel Castells, and he speaks of the digital divide, like that you have to have access to IT and you have to also have knowledge about such stuff. Like if you're in a developing country in sub-Saharan Africa, you're not going to be able to go into the internet. And even though it does have positive qualities, as for instance, we saw that parts of the revolution in Egypt were organized also by such forums or platforms as Facebook and Twitter. So I think there's always, as with everything, these two sides to the story.
I'm not sure there's such a big problem of accessibility, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, because particularly they don't have landlines, but they have many mobile phones, typically. And yeah, I think technology gives a strong echo, but it really depends on what the human beings, the people, does with this technology. It helped launching the Arab revolts, but then I think it's helped creating a common voice for the population, which a leader could have had, but then it doesn't help creating a real serious political project or something to back up, something for the longer term, I guess. So yeah, it gives a stronger echo, and that's the same for information. everyone can share their opinion more easily, but I'm not sure it's a big, like, the bigger problem. The bigger work still needs to be done through education and everything. So that's what I think.
Yeah, just recently the Chaos Computer team, they discovered a illegal spyware founded by the government by the German government, which they claimed they didn't use, but the new information technology is also still not integrated in most parts of our official governments. They still rely on very crude techniques from our point of view of, communication technology. They still use pen and paper instead of keyboard and notebook. Which has to
I
be
just would like to answer, to comment something that Phil said in the beginning about the censor in internet. That how we see now internet, of course, is a free space where everybody can get information about everything from everyone. It's also true that in the future, I think, it's a possibility. In some countries, they are already doing that. They are trying to limit also the freedom of information in internet. So I say this because also in my country, they are studying laws to limit it. So yes, it's a very important instrument we have, but don't you think that somehow they will always find a way to limit the free passage of information? The big powers,
Okay, so thanks for your question, but we have to quickly move on. So the next question is presented by Amy, and it's, does technology reinforce class division?
Thank you very much. Some of this has already been touched on, I think, especially with mentioning Africa, and we have sort of a lot of discrepancies in wealth in terms of who can afford technology and who can't. Obviously, the problem is a lot of new technologies become very expensive. Not all classes of society, for want of a better term, then therefore have access. It's not a luxury that's afforded to everybody. As such, if we consider the role of technology in education and our increasing dependence upon it, does that then limit some people's access to education? Do some families from lower income backgrounds, do their children have limitations to the education they can receive? Equally, just going back to the Africa point that somebody has already brought up, the reliance on mobile phones has actually increased by 550%, I think it is, between 2004 and 2009, which is a phenomenal increase. And coupled with the fact that the mobile phone industry equally relies on resources such as coltan and gold, etc., which are all mined and resourced from African nations, and that also have conflicts over these resources, it really creates an interesting dilemma between our reliance on technology and how amazing its communicative powers are, and equally the damaging effects it can have. So I'd like to open the discussion on that point.
Anyone got something to say?
On the note of education and how being from a lower income background can affect that, I'd have to say that it does present some severe difficulties, because if you don't have the money, you can't necessarily afford a mobile phone or an internet connection. But just as people managed to thrive in the times before we had such devices, you can still go to the library and do it the traditional way. Whilst it can often be a lot more long-winded and a lot more difficult, you can still do that. And like I say, I think a classical education in that sense can actually be better than going on, say, onto Wikipedia, where whilst anyone can contribute, you can't always be entirely certain of the accuracy of the information. Yeah, that's about it.
I think it's a good point, but I'd just like to counter it in terms of the ideas that you see schools nowadays, because schools are so reliant on technology themselves, the institutional sort of pathways to learning are then technologized as such, in such a way that if you're then from a low income background, you might be barred from certain education because you're expected to hand in your school report, word processed or what have you. But if you don't have a PC at home, then this can cause problems and then class tensions within that.
I wouldn't say that it's really such a big issue in Germany, because obviously pretty much everyone has at least one computer, mostly 2 or 3, a desktop computer, a Apple Macintosh notebook, a smartphone, whatever it may be, iPhone or Galaxy, whatever. The problems with that probably lie in countries with a lower GDP per capita. So like, I don't know, Eastern Europe still has a weaker economy and lower access to all this technology. Southeast Asia is very strong in technology. Of course, we come here back to sub-Saharan Africa, where everybody has 3 mobile phones, but I guess the network coverage in the countryside is not really that good. So I would say also Wikipedia is rather reliable because they have a very strict policy that you have to open your sources and it's.
Sorry, we had to cut you off. Okay, so Amy's got something to say.
Sorry to cut you off, Phil. Although I'm not entirely sure I totally agree with your opinions about Wikipedia, but never mind, we'll move on. Just a comment going back to the education link. Although it's not totally impossible for children or whoever from a low-income family to access the internet, to physically have to leave your house to go to a library, consider the working hours of a library, that adds barriers that a child from maybe a wealthier background wouldn't necessarily have to come across when they're trying to do maybe extracurricular education, etc. So while I appreciate your point, there's still a discrepancy there between wealth and the access to technology.
Okay, so sorry again, but we're going to have to move on to the next topic, which is Sarah and technology as a weapon.
Okay, so a lot of people have a mobile phone and a laptop and a television and so on and so forth, and so they don't see technology as a weapon. But the more that technology advances, the more dangerous it has become. I was researching for a thesis on nuclear weapons, and there's been a virus that's been created called Stuxnet, and it's a worm that infiltrates gaps in Windows operating systems. And what that does is it attacks specific software that's used to operate industrial machinery. Now, if you just think about that for a second, there's a virus that can be sent to a computer that can completely affect a country's industrial works. So if you think about a nuclear program, someone could send a virus to a nuclear program and either cut it off completely or set it off. And that would cause thousands and thousands of deaths just from one computer in a completely different country. This has happened in Iran. In Iran, 60,000 computers have been affected by Stuxnet, which has actually halted their nuclear energy program, or it did last year. So that in itself is showing you how dangerous technology can be. When you're looking at your iPhone, you don't necessarily think that it could be used as a weapon, but you could, Stuxnet could be modified so that someone on their iPod could send a virus somewhere the more and more that technology advances. Another thing to think about in terms of technology is the Big Brother state, the creation of CCTV cameras, the creation of spyware. All of this is technology. All of it can affect states' relationships. It can affect, interpersonal relationships, and so on and so forth. And that that I find really interesting, and I was just wondering if anyone had any opinions on technology as a weapon.
Thank you. I was thinking in the same line that technology is a weapon, but I was thinking about it in a metaphorical sense. I did not even imagine it as a literal translation, because in a weapon, metaphorically, technology is a weapon because just as weapons could be used purposively or more usefully for security purposes or for protective purposes, when it's not regulated, like when you give a kid or a child a violent weapon, it could be abused. And I was thinking that there's this mass perception that technology is an important thing, it should not be regulated, and it's absolutely relevant for development, and that is just a pretense. Because we all know technology, call it an invention of Steve Jobs, may he so rest in peace, or whether it is the internet service or whatever it is absolutely a black box. We do not have a clue how these things work. No one knows exactly administratively who regulates the internet and how much of your security you have. You buy a mobile phone, and even before you could get used to using an iPhone 4, you have an iPhone 4S. And it's absolutely a new regime that rules our lives, and we've not realized how much we are slaves to Skype and Facebook. So there's a huge misunderstanding and a general lack of interest to, kind of come out positively and say how dangerous technology is. And we don't have to say technology is dangerous. What we have to say is that technology is an infinite something. It's just this kind of total new era of a living that we all have, and we need to regulate. The third thing is I would like to be a bit more critical. I feel that all of these technologies as we see them they start as commercial entities. I'm not too sure if most of these technologies, whether it is an Apple product or whether it is Facebook, meant ideally to genuinely connect people globally more than it served to expand an empire or personal wealth. And I think that now that we feel we can use technology positively, we should also want to tell those who invent technologies to have a sense of responsibility, and also to know that humanity depends on their creations. And in as much as we use Facebook, and in as much as the accounts get fatter, there is a corporate responsibility that should come with it.
Yeah, I still agree with Mark. I think it's not really technology itself that's the weapon. I think it's how people use technology that makes it a weapon. And I think the real conflict you're seeing at the moment, the real battle, is between governments and the people, and corporations and how technology corporations, how they're using, how they're protecting, or they're citing free speech as a way of saying, look at the London riots, for example. They said that you could never shut down the BlackBerry network, for example, because free speech. But there must be some kind of a limit to how much free speech is a real argument here. If it is being used for pointless organizing violent events and arson, is there a limit to free speech? And in the same way, do corporations and the governments, are they trying to limit or censor technology too much? So where does the balance come there? I think that's an interesting thing to look at.
Thanks. I don't think we should be surprised, though, that technology is being used as a weapon by people, Mankind will always find different ways and more efficient ways to kill each other and to cause damage on a larger and larger scale. I mean, we saw it in the Cold War, for example, when we had the atom bomb, which then became the hydrogen bomb, which then became the nuclear bomb. And we're seeing it now at the dawn of the cyber age, where we've got all these new technologies and weapons of warfare that are just beyond our control. So long as our democratic systems continue to evolve at the same rate as our technological systems, we should be okay. That's the end of my point.
I just wanted to go back to Mark's point about people being slaves to things like Facebook and Skype, which I agree with. I watched this program called The Virtual Revolution on BBC, which I recommend to watch. It's a really good watch, but it talks about how in South Korea there's a massive problem with kids being addicted to the internet, and they literally just sit in front of a screen all day, and they're addicted to like video games and stuff, and they have no social life. They're literally like social retards because they've got like 400 friends on Facebook who they've never even met, and they just consider them friends. So I think it just shows that I think the internet is a great tool, and I think it can do so much good in the world, but it should just be seen as a tool, and it's not the be-all and end-all of life, and kids need to learn that, you know, there's a real world out there, and they need to experience that. So, yeah, that's my point.
Anybody else?
You know, first thing I wanted to say was that I'm fortunate to be here among the youth of the world, actually, and being able to, you know, like experience their thoughts and their dreams and aspirations. It's very important because there's often a disconnect between an older generation and the youth. And so it's very interesting for me to experience this. I'm from the first television generation. I've been sitting in front of a screen for 60 years, you know, and most of my compatriots in my generation have done the same thing, especially in the Western world, especially in America. There's this idea that there's a television in every room. And where I'm from, people have it in the kitchen, in the bedroom, and then also in the living room. So information, there's always this thirst for information, you know, if it's provided. Now, the question of technology being used as a weapon, gunpowder has killed more people than anything else. And it's been around a very long time. And yeah, of course, you have one weapon that can take out 100,000, 200,000, 1 million people. And then the resulting contamination with radiation and what have you could take tens of millions of people out. Of course, that is the case today. But gunpowder itself has killed, I can't even begin to imagine what that number is. So I think we have to be very careful about how we analyze the situation.
I totally agree with your point about how damaging gunpowder has been, but equally I think we're talking less about what the damaging effects of technology already have been and rather what the potential could be, because the potential for technology, while equally could be as damaging as gunpowder ever has been, is so much more precise and needs one person to press one button and then an entire civilization can be wiped out, which I think is something that we're now debating rather than the overall mass of people over history that have been killed by gunpowder. But I do accept your point.
Sorry, I'm going to have to give it to him.
I think there's a really interesting debate that you can have about kind of technology and the problems it can cause. And there's a really interesting human rights basis to it. On the one hand, if you use technology in the example of the internet, it may well soon become kind of an enshrined concept of human rights that everyone has access to internet. But at the same time, kind of a lot of governments use the internet, have these back doors into internet where they can monitor what you're doing, and they have it in phones, mobile phones. So in one sense, you have this technological human rights evolution where everyone has freedom to access, but on the other hand, it's become a huge tool for government and institutions to monitor you. So I think that's something that you need to consider and we should all think about at some point.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got 10 minutes left. So basically the general question of does technology in general hinder or enhance? And we're basically going to open up to the floor to what anyone else has left to say. Alicia.
I just wanted to link Mark's point back up to Amy's point about education and whether it leaves some people that are not privileged enough behind. I was just thinking that the internet can be addictive, like Mark said, and people can spend a lot of time in front of it and not learn very much. And I think for that reason, technology isn't necessarily a positive thing in education. You could learn a lot more by going out and experiencing things, you know, going to museums, reading books, whatever. I think it's not necessarily detrimental.
Just to add, I've been sitting here listening, and people have been saying, oh, in sub-Saharan Africa, blah, 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 blah. But we have to also remember that technology has really created a new wave of development in African countries, especially the cell phones. We are seeing a new kind of technology, or how cell phones are being used in especially East African countries, where instead of, I mean, we are in Europe, North America, or wherever, we're running to Western Union, we're running to MoneyGram, filling out papers and stuff like that. But there's also something called M-Pesa in East Africa, where you just type in some code on your cell phone and you send the money to somebody. So that is just a really good way. It's faster than us here filling out forms and standing in a queue and all of that. And also, we have to look at other sectors that technology has helped, like especially, well, my focus is Africa, so I'm gonna go back to Africa. But for example, we saw where this guy in Africa created an app to know when to milk his cows. We saw when to know how much rainfall is going to come, to help with agriculture and all of that. So in that sense, technology has really revolutionized development in Africa, and how they can implement it in their society to help to create something that is beneficial to them, and spread the development across. So we should not really just say, oh, it's bad and there's no, instead of just saying, oh, there's no proper coverage in Africa and whatever, people have 3 cell phones, there's a reason why they have that, by the way. Thanks.
No, it was related to what Alicia was saying, and what you said, your comment about this thirst for information, and I think that it's actually a thirst for entertainment, because if you see the quality of what you find on the internet, like it could be it could be useful and you might learn, but most of the time it's just trash. So I'm afraid that like internet creates an addiction for more useless information.
Maybe if maybe I'll add something too briefly, and then I'll just be brief. I think from the cultural diplomacy point of view, I think I always argue, and some of you guys who've heard my lectures may have heard this before, the biggest factor separating human beings in the world, in my opinion, is not race or ethnicity or nationality or gender. It's access. Some individuals in the world have access to what they want and what they need. Some don't have access, whether it's access to peace, access to education, access to information. So in that sense, I would say technology, of course, is great because it really enables this access. As you were saying, you don't necessarily need a computer at home. You can do so many things also from your cell phone. So I think it's really just a matter of time when, let's say, those sub-Saharan Africans or Asians or whoever it is who actually maybe don't have a computer yet do have a cell phone. I know also from my wife's family in Sfax, Tunisia, which is a big sort of working class city in Tunisia. They have typically their one computer for the whole household, but they do have a computer with internet connection as well as then the cell phones. And on the one hand, that gives them access to many great things for information. On the other hand, it gives them access to all kinds of other information, whether it's, let's say, superficial things, entertainment, or also dangerous things. Coming to your point of technology as a weapon, Joseph Nye gave a lecture for ICD about 2 years ago where he was arguing that actually Osama bin Laden, you could also say, is an expert of soft power, in the sense bin Laden didn't pay anyone to fly into the World Trade Center. He didn't scare them into flying to the World Trade Center. He attracted them to his interpretation of quote-unquote religion. And it's proven that a large degree of that kind of propaganda or information or outreach or whatever you call it was actually done also through the internet. So in that sense, of course, access isn't always a good thing. It depends who's using it and for what purposes. So that's kind of the flip side. So I'd say I agree, it can be used as a weapon, but of course it can also give us access to many other things. And for me also from a cultural diplomacy point of view, I really think every relationship ideally should be based on dialogue, understanding, and trust. So the first step is of course dialogue. And I think that's the wonderful, powerful thing that we do have. If used in the right way, technology can assist us in having more dialogue. As long as we don't sit in front of our screen all day and don't have friends anymore, and as long as we have maybe some ICD meetings bringing people together also. I think the great thing about this room also right now, we're all here from all different parts of the world. That's part of the reason why we have these discussions, and I think that can never be replaced. But in addition to that, this extra access can help. So I have mixed feelings about the debate, but just from a cultural diplomacy point of view, a few thoughts. I'm not sure who is next, but maybe first some new voices who haven't spoken yet.
Hi, sorry, 2 more So, Ines.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that this institute, the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy, wouldn't work without the internet. Everything we do, all the conferences we organize, every step of the way we need the internet. We need to research, we need to do marketing, we need to contact speakers, we need to contact participants. We can't do that without the internet. So yes, I agree, sometimes we do abuse it, but if we do know how to use it, it's extremely useful. So Mark, you were saying Facebook, Skype. Yes, we do abuse it, but it's such a useful tool to keep in touch. Yeah, I just wanted to point that out. Anyone?
I just wanted to draw it back to education. I know we're all probably early 20s, mid-20s, so when we were in primary school age, so elementary school, we were all still learning to read and write, read with books, writing with pens and paper. These days, most children work on computers from the age of about 5 years old. So I was just wanting to point out that maybe, yes, education is growing, is getting better, it's getting bigger, everyone's involved in it, but using a pen and paper, we all have our individual handwriting, we all express our views maybe differently. On computers, you've got spell check, you've got everything done for you. Maybe educationally wise, I don't think that using computers at such a young age is as good as that they're trying to express now.
Hi, sorry we're out of time. But so this is the end of the first ICD public debate, and I think it's fair to say it was fairly successful. Thank you all for your participation. I'd do a conclusion, but that would just be repeating everything. But I think definitely we have to be grateful for the internet and technology and not take it for granted. So thank you very much. If you could all please help put the chairs back, that would be amazing, and there is wine afterwards. Thank you.